Um, a lot of people have cool kickoffs and audio to their go lives, and I'm working on that. I'll definitely get on that once I feel like I'm doing this the professional way. I've got a new channel called Thought Leaders, and I think that tonight's episode is about the journey of using the computer for prediction. So I, I look at the analytics and I look at the long watch time, and I don't really see people watching entire episodes. So I think that these posts, these videos are more about a documentary of something that I can come back and look at later. Um, so I guess I have a picture in my mind that I should share with my own video documentary of my journey into using computers for prediction. So let me try to paint the picture of what that day looked like, that night looked like. And there's been several times in my career where when I've spent a lot of time with the computational device, such as a computer, my mind has sort of melded with its capabilities, whether it be programming or design or advanced animation or scripting or learning languages or studying the world. It's not always crystalline the way the computer will portray, for instance, a place in the world or what an experience might be like, or but it is an oracle to me in a way that in the early days of using computers and the internet, and even now, there's a certain skill set that comes along with being able to research and use the tool to find things out. And there might be some inaccuracies or some bad habits that get built where you learn to use the internet of today, which primarily for me has been Google now, right? Google search, to use it to reinforce things I believe I know, reinforce things that I need to know, uh, kind of corroborate my opinions, though to some degree I don't know if I have any opinion. I mean, of course, to some degree I will argue points and point to what I believe are facts, but overall, there's so much complexity in the world and the sciences of the world that it's often easier to be a researcher who points at someone and says, this person puts in a lot of effort in their thought process, and so this is what they have brought to bear. And, then I put some sort of percentage belief behind that with some sort of variable guesstimate of how accurate or how correct I think they are. But I put a lot of faith into, some data. When there's a lot of data or someone who's been, renowned as a leader in the field, who's put in a lot of thought, often, like many folks, I will give them some sway. So, anyways, I don't know what the preamble is here. I don't really have a 16-minute video in mind. And in fact, this is one of those videos where I'll probably think that I should take it down because it will share some of my more inner thoughts, things that I share one on one with people. And I have to admit that to some degree, I find a lot of loneliness when it comes to the beliefs that I compare with my fellow human beings. So I don't want to be an outlier. I don't want to be someone who believes things that most people don't believe. And often it's been my fellow colleagues who've been in computer science for as long as I have who I can have these types of conversations with about, you know, how do I say it? All kinds of things that seem in the past to be science fiction and have become closer to science fact than ever before. So I guess let me just, before I start using buzzwords of today and talking crazy because I will. I want to share with you my mental journey and how the journey of the internet and using it as a research tool has changed my destiny so many times. So, a while back, I had drivers that are not much different than today, but maybe now I have a little bit of experience and wisdom, or at least experience and knowledge. Wisdom is what you do with it, right? So I recall wanting to be in business, and at the root level, I have to share that many times I wanted to do things in my career and my life to, impress my family or my mom or my dad to, become someone successful and find that appreciation and make them proud. Some of the most amazing journeys and treks that man or woman will do, and I'm actually referring to myself, can be based on the most basal of drivers, the most childhood drivers, right? You want to make your parents proud. You want your friends to see you successful. You want to make $1 million. You want to do all the things that would make the outer world see you and go, "What a success," or "What a hard worker," or "What a smart guy," or "He's a genius," or "Look what he did," you know. And some of that has come to pass. I've had some success stories. I've had some challenges. I've had a lot of success stories. Of one thing that can be said about my own journey, and this video is not about me yet again talking about my accolades, though it's good to revisit them. This video is more about a digital diary of being autodidactic and what this tool that I'm staring into now has done to me and has done for me, probably better said, when used as a oracle, when used as a research tool. It has educated me. It has opened doors for me. It has helped shape my mind. And in many ways, much like the early travelers of the uncharted seas, it really has been a tool to navigate the open web. So I remember the web from the beginning, and I remember the web without ads. I mean, I really do. I remember terrible websites. When I mean terrible, I mean looking. No design pattern, no common look and feel, no belief that if the website looked a certain way you would have more belief in it. They were all ugly. Times New Roman fonts, no advanced searches. And let's just go back. We don't got to go back to the beginning of the internet, though. It's been surreal in my career, in my journey, to recall the conversations I had with. I can only remember conversations from junior high, though I know it happened afterward. But I remember standing in a group of people and we were arguing, I don't know what, something that none of us knew because the library was far enough away. We had no books and no teacher around to tell us otherwise. So we argued our points in a circle. And there was this sort of, maybe it went around 3 times. And everybody had their opinion and they stated it. But I remember stating my opinion so voraciously, just as they all did in the group, and yet still could not articulate a truth or a proof, or at least some number that is large enough that says that, hey, this X amount of people or data says that my point is accurate, and you can actually refute all that. I just happen to agree with that. So, anyways, fast forwarding back to the internet and what the web has become, um, the tool that we call the internet today is evolving. It is consolidating in a way. You know, if we look at Google and use your primary search and all the tools they're creating. But anyways, I don't want this to get boring, but let me just make it exciting and tell you. I recall starting a technology company with some folks, and even then, I wasn't I was still a researcher. Maybe I had done some coding, but I wasn't a real programmer. I had done some design, computer-aided design, so I understood two-dimensional design and what the power of what a computer can do for your career and even change the shape of the way you imagine things. The tools I used for design, though not crystal clear, eventually became part of my mind. I could imagine things. I saw the world differently just from being a graphic designer. And we kind of dismiss that tooling as an external software device and then your brain interacting with it. But of course, I recall being on flights where, computers weren't allowed. Your phone, even way back then, you didn't even really have one. But I bought like the Windows CE little handheld or whatever, and they just said, hey, you can't do any of that stuff. You can't use your laptop on the plane. And I remember the first laptop I bought was almost $5,000 and it weighed like 15 pounds. It was ugly. And so I'd shut my eyes and I could do design. I could remember the tooling and I could create. And I didn't stop and think about the time when I couldn't imagine that way. I didn't stop and think about could I see colors with my mind's eyes shut, with my eyes shut. Certainly you skip over those parts, in your youth, and you start to, especially when you take on tools, software tools that empower you to create. So what's the point of this diatribe is to share the evolution of my mind, and then I had wanted to make this video to pick up where I'd left off, because if I could have, forget 1993 or 95 or, being a desktop publisher first and then seeing people come into the Kinko's copies I worked at as like not a kid, but a young adult. And on a floppy disk, I have this thing called a web page. I need to put it on AOL or something. Okay. And just the evolution that I went through myself in building web pages shortly thereafter. So I remember after starting my ISP with some very smart guys that I left after 2 years. I just wasn't ready to work as hard as them. I think that's the honest truth. I just was a little bit younger than them. I had the beach lifestyle. They worked really hard. So I remember I came off a vacation after, and I did too. The skills I brought to the table were valuable. I'm not going to discount my contribution, but I will say that my business sense and experience was limited back then. But I still had the drive. It's why I founded the company with them and the want, right? So I learned a lot from working with those gentlemen about perseverance and what it takes, the commitment that it takes to start a business. And we grew a really large business. So with respect, I bowed out and just said, hey, I want to go and I want to do this type of things, which was build more web. They respected that, because the business we had was more about machines and networking and less about creating in the actual digital world. So I moved across the street and I made a complementary business where anybody could come and talk to me about their web vision. And if I was to check my resume, which frankly could be a little more accurate, but much like much data, it's so hard over the years. You adjust a month here and there, you lose your resume, you redo it. And so the dates, I think it was close to 2000, maybe 2001, possibly 2002, no later than 2003, but let's just say the early 2000s. And why is this story relevant? And who's going to be watching this video? I mean, here I am in 2020, and I have to tell you that it's going to be, first and foremost, for sure, I know the first watcher of this video is going to be YouTube's artificial intelligence video encoder, which will convert every single one of my words into text and then immediately consume that text and then immediately cross-reference and link this video and recommend it to people based on the keywords and the wording I used, and maybe quite a bit of other things that I don't need to bring up in this audio, but it could literally be the tone of my voice, the facial expressions, the time that I upload it, the name of the channel, just tons of data points, lots more than they probably care to release, but an artificial intelligence software. So back in 2000, 2001, 2002, just the early 2000s, I moved across the street from my internet service provider and I opened up an application service provider, which was the precursor to software as a service. And what it was really saying was technology is complicated to make. And you can come to my ASP and tell me what you want, and we'll go ahead and we'll make it. And you can pay monthly fees, whereas something that would normally cost you 5,000 or 10,000, or you simply just couldn't make it without building a team that would cost you a lot. It's cost prohibitive. Instead, you can give us your good ideas, and we'll tell you the general cost for the system. We'll start to augment the system. We'll run it on servers. We'll do it all. And all you have to do is pay an amortized fee. So I would usually amortize the fees over a 3-year payment plan. People wanted to do e-commerce. They wanted to sell videos online. They had a number of ideas, and it wasn't until I ran into some financial folks that I saw profitability for them, which in turn became cyclical, and they wanted more work done on the stuff that I leased to them. So it kind of drew me into that industry. But I had talked to everyone, hundreds of people, hundreds of companies, maybe, I don't know, more. If I really kept track, I could even say 1,000. I mean, in a 25-year web career, people have expressed to me all of their vision, all of their businesses. I've touched on everything. And, here I am in 2020 making a video that is more of like a benchmark, a retrospective of my career, sort of regretting that in 2000, early 2000, that I couldn't document quite the way I can now those moments, those aha moments. So I think I sat down to make this video and just to sort of cruise the web and use it as a research tool again to corroborate, I guess, what I had thought I learned more than 20 years ago that really gave me an aha moment. So the pearls of wisdom I'm going to share here, if anybody ever makes it this far into this video, is going to be about a lot of deep things. So one day I was working in my lab alone, trying to build a business, scared about the rent. Got to make the rent, got to offer services, got a client or two, got some new clients. People literally walked in and sat down and talked with me. And I would write up contracts. And as a one-man band, occasionally I would let them know I'd get back to them tomorrow after I had talked to my partners. I just didn't want them to think that I was doing everything. So I would sometimes call my mom and talk about a contract, or I would call a friend and just kind of spell out what I knew I needed to do to make the company have an ironclad, strong foundation, not only in programming, but especially in contracts. So what's the point? I had a lot of things to research to pull off, and I started getting good at it. And the web back then wasn't driven mostly by ads, but people were putting information online. So I would find myself getting good at researching to solve problems. And the clients from the student loan, the lenders, they came in, they had a lender code. Their passion that they showed in their eyes for what they were going to get done was the kind of passion I knew for sure that if I invested me and my time in my heart, in my brain, into making them successful, that it would have a reverse effect. I would become successful. And there was a lot of success from that type of thinking. It's in the business books. But what's the point I want to make that I'm really dragging out here, that maybe I'll drag it out so long that it won't have this profound effect? But I can still remember the walls. They were yellow, kind of like an ugly yellow, like a schoolhouse yellow from the 80s, public school yellow. And the room, I had my stand-up desk and my big monitors, my big CRT monitors, and I put in some long hours. Sometimes I wouldn't leave the office. I had a second office in the back with a couch, and I thought this is what I'm going to do to earn, just like all the stories about the success stories. I slept under my desk. I slept on the couch at work. I worked all night. It wasn't the healthiest things you could do, but it's better than driving home so tired at 3 or 4 in the morning. But I started to hear from clients, like my loan clients, about things that they knew could be built, that they had seen other companies either pull off or try to pull off, or they knew of a company that pulled a thing off and made a lot of money. So I wrote a second contract with them, and it was about automation. And the web wasn't littered with the type of automation that they were talking about. And so I remember the night that I stayed after telling them, look, I'll write up the second agreement, but let me do some research first to make sure that it's achievable, and then I'll let you know tomorrow. So I worked while all my friends went and played that night in the beach areas. Yet another night I worked, and I worked hard. I searched and searched and searched and searched and learned to search. And then I found the most obscure message. Stack Overflow didn't exist. The forums were terrible, but you'd find some post way down after some crazy search, and way at the bottom, someone said, hey, I got that one thing to work. And they said one word. And from that one word, you search and you search and you search and you find some code. And then from that code, you don't understand it at the time because you're not a programmer. And you realize, you know what? Nobody has the code out, and nobody has said that this is possible. But because people have said this is possible and that is possible and this code word, I'm going to go ahead and feel like I'm 75% optimistic that this can be done. So, the clients came back the next day. They said, hey, you had some time to research if you could do this new project, build this new software. And I said, yeah, I'm confident we can do it. And it wasn't easy. That software, fast forwarding, went on for the next 3 or 4 years to be something I billed as much as $4,000 a month for. And it ran on a desktop all by itself. It did the job of what would take human beings 10 minutes to do. It would do it in 6 seconds. In the company that we worked in and in the company that we used it to serve, it had a name. And everybody referred to it by a name. It was a good team member. This thing was perfect. It took a few months to get it perfect, but once we got it running perfect, it ran and it did the job where the competitors in lending would have entire rooms. And later on in my career, I met those people, those big loan companies, and they showed me the rooms full of people who, frankly, that wasn't the greatest job. They're out of college and they had to do a lot of manual digital labor, and it still goes on today. So automation back then, I'll never forget the beach days I had where I could go skateboard down to get my lunch, getting sunburned in the sun, getting a tan every day, and coming back and watching this named software, this automated employee, do the job and earn $4,000 a month. And it made our clients a lot of money. But that's not what I wanted to. I mean, of course, I always bring that up as a legend, and I want to reboot some stories like that, and I will. But I think the story that I want to share is that once you learn to search and research so persistently, so feverishly, so stubbornly until you find the answers, that sort of addictive way of searching, it's not an addiction, but you call it autodidactic. But I mean, it has to take the mind of someone, I don't know what the term would be, that's just much like an addict, just keeps trying, keeps going, won't stop until you find the answer. Maybe there's another name for it, but that personality trait, that ability to just keep trying, was something that I finally learned that when I take it and I point it at anything and research, that I could learn anything and I could find the smallest parts of a larger thing, and then my mind would put together the answer that that thing is achievable. So, with all of that preamble, I think that one night, again, using computers for quite a few years, sometimes I'd be sitting around doing my work, thinking, and words would pop in my mind or thought processes. And again, I go back to the most basal drivers, which is like as a child, I never wanted to lose my parents, right? I never wanted to lose people that I loved. And I was sitting there in my office and I thought, what if I could make a business so successful that everybody in the company could, have insurance, have like stock in the company so that when they finally pass away, like we'd want to keep them in the company for up to 50 years, their entire career. But what would make them stay? And it would be a piece of a company that, and I didn't know the word for it, but I was basically stating like something inside of me strangely had this intuition that it would be possible to preserve someone when they pass because technology, I guess, would somehow be able to repair them. Strange as that sounds, I didn't watch a lot of sci-fi movies as a kid. There weren't a lot of movies. Occasionally you'd see a movie about a space star, a starship that had to do like cryonics, but I don't even think I remembered the name. And maybe that's where some of the intuition came from, frankly. It was from science fiction, right? So, but something inside of me called in my head and was like, you're gonna make this. You can do this. Now that may be inaccurate, that I could have done it, but something inside of me made me want to search. So I did. So I went on the web, and much like I solved that automation employee thing that seemed impossible, and we made it. We got it, and that was hard to do. So I took that same fervor and I went after understanding how I could preserve the loved ones in my life by making a successful company, as weird as that sounds. And what do you think I found? I went on the web, I started doing searches and researching, and on some very obscure websites, very disconnected websites, I found, just like the programming, small websites, ugly websites, no advertisements on them, written by doctors, physicists, futurists. So you run into terms like futurist. You're like, what is that? Oh, these guys are kooks. Like look at their website. It's horrible. Look at these photos they're using on their website. What a bunch of goofs. They got quasars and weird little burst lights. They look like a bad version of an old NASA website, And so I ran into a website out of nowhere after a bunch of searching late night, again, pointing my mind through an electronic system to seek information, which I guess again I might still call some sort of an oracle. So I run into this site called Alcor. And so Alcor, if I show it to anyone, they immediately dismiss it and say that these guys are kooks and never gonna happen. And it's been going like that for 20 something years. Doesn't matter how many technological breakthroughs happen, doesn't matter how many breakthroughs in heart surgeries and arthroscopic surgeries and robotics that are doing surgeries from over the internet now, or AI predicting, looking at like 10 million chest x-rays and now being able to predict, cancer in the lungs better than the best doctors. None of that. Doesn't matter. No matter what. You show someone something like a cryonics company that at the time had an in vitrification process, which I read the stuff and I was like fascinated but freaked out. But like there was enough technological wording in there that it led me to search those words. And I found other websites, probably the same way they did. And they would be published by a physicist, and another one published by a biologist, and another one published. And these weren't no ads. There was no ads on the sites. There was no way to pay. Some of them were colleges, but they were disparate. They were all over the web, right? And so by collecting that information early, like in raw form, the picture that Alcor was painting seemed corroborated to a degree. So Alcor, being the futurist company that they were, they had had a bumpy road. They had had some mistakes with some founders. They maybe had done some bunk procedures. I don't know. Someone even published a book to slander them, and then they refuted the entire book. With all of that, I guess, hater data aside, there's still science. So what they were saying scientifically was a process. I guess you could call it an embalming process, but it's more like a preservation process, because rather than using embalming fluid into the person that had passed, they use an vitrification um, liquid cocktail, if you will, that has certain chemicals that, when infused into the body, very much like they do when they embalm, when they cool the bodies down to like it's not freezing, it's like very, very much colder than freezing, but they don't actually freeze the bodies. They cool them to such a degree that, yes, back then they could predict, I think it was something like a 92% fracturing of the architectures of the mind. So, like, we have these very, very delicate um, dendrites and axons and structures in the brain, and the lattices of the mind. Back then and even now, depending on who you talk to, which, I mean, if I'm talking about someone who's not deeply in the field of computer science and we're following the leaders, and I don't mean following in a bad way, I mean like following what they're saying and understanding it, you would immediately stop and thinking, okay, well, that's no good. There's a 94% fracture rate, like 94% uh, efficacy, 6% fracture rate. And that meant that, like, the cooling process caused enough damage that the mind was not perfectly preserved. But more so than embalming someone and sticking them in a box and letting the air just kind of get to them, or burning them, down into dust or ashes, if you will. But preserving them 96% perfectly. That was back in 2000-ish. Now, what their postulation was, and I make a point about this, is, again, I wasn't advocating any of this. I was studying this, but what they said was the percentage of faith that they had, though it's not a religion, was in this thing called nanotechnology, which nano is a scale, it's a size. There's even something smaller called picoscale, and then you get down into the quantum size, or I might have missed a size here and there, but it's just nano is very small. I think it's like 1,000 times smaller than the width of a human hair, or some number. Tiny. And smaller than the molecules that are running around in your body, smaller than the parts that make up your brain. So they postulated that the doubling of Moore's law, the speed at which computers were computating, that the evolution, the eventual, fast evolution of computational systems would be able to leverage nanotechnologies, which are small tools, nanobots, molecular bots, whatever you want to call them, small biogenetic materials, machines, medications, somehow tied in with intelligences, sequencing, programming, and stuff I could understand even back then. they said that they believe that future technology would be able to do something about that, be able to. And I look, I try to liken it now that I've had more time to think about it, that if you like walked into a room where someone had set up a bunch of dominoes, stood them all up, but like an earthquake happened and all 1 million dominoes fell down on the ground. Well, if you walked in with a three-dimensional camera and recorded this perfect set of everything that had fallen and ran it through, some pretty rudimentary, not rudimentary, but some math algorithms. And we're not talking artificial intelligence here, but we're talking some computational devices, but maybe we are going to be talking AI here pretty quick. You could reverse through several thousand iterations of testing where the every single piece had fallen where it was standing beforehand. And it would take a lot of simulations. But in 2020, that's what's burgeoning right now is that's how we're teaching neural nets, which are much like our brains, how to learn by feeding them lots and lots of data, and then they can make a very good guess on what things are or where they were and reassemble things, reverse engineer things, find the needles in the haystack very fast. So could back then it was this belief that a future technology that we had would be able to reverse, the breaking or the fragmentation of the mind that was lossy, much like data loss. But it could like reverse the damage. Okay, that's the best way to say it. And I said, okay, well, I don't know enough about nanotech, and I don't know about these future technologies, but I knew it was better than falling for the old $4,000 nice wooden casket and paint my lips with makeup and fill me with some high grade alcohol embalming fluid and stuff me in a box and in the ground. That and is it morbid to talk about death? A long time ago I stopped feeling that way. And I guess the fascination with, I guess they call it life extension now, I don't guess, I know, is that when I started looking at things scientifically like this, I didn't lose my faith or my ability to be involved in religious studies. At times, I'd say I wavered in and out, but it never deleted God in my mind. It just helped me understand the mind of a God that could create complexities like our universe, or a puppy dog, or a human being, or a rainforest, or our world, and all of the just deeply complex things that make our existence possible. So, what's the point is that back then I had to have faith, where I had had to struggle with faith before, out of a book that at times seemed contradictory when I'm talking about the Bible, and it says just have faith. But it was a big leap of faith. Whereas when you start to get down to sciences, you can start to quantify into numbers the amount of faith you need to have that those 4% data loss, the 4% fracturing of the mind when you put it into a cryonic suspension, that could be lessened, that you could increase that number, the efficacy, into the high enough numbers that even the own body, when brought back through therapies, could actually heal itself enough, even when with its own, innate abilities. So fast forward to, I forget, 2012, 2011, 2012, 2013. I can't remember. I did end up going to the Alcor conference, and they had better in vitrification methods. They talk about them. They show slices of brains that they worked on, and they're not human brains in those experiments, but they they do talk about how they improved it to 97.8% efficacy, getting really close to that point, and if not close enough, that the person would be able to come back and their mind would auto repair. So then it brings into other questions like, well, what if they're 90 years old and they haven't had um, any other therapies to rejuvenate their old organs or their body? Then that gets into deeper discussions. But again, a lot of things rooted in nanotechnology and regenerative medicine. So this ongoing, like back in 2000, early 2000, I never thought I would be sitting here about to do a video knowing that the only almost sentient being that's going to watch this is going to be YouTube's algorithm and maybe Google search. And, I was reading about the YouTube team the other day, and because I work for these algorithms, right? If I do electronic online marketing, I'm basically trying to not manipulate them, but get their attention, let's say. So for my clients is branding and marketing, and to get them to come give attention to the latest release of a video or a web page or whatnot. So we do serve humans. Hey, we want to brand to you, but at the middle of the day, at the end of the day, the middle person, the middle thing is an algorithm. But more than an algorithm, it's artificial intelligence and stuff that we don't really completely comprehend. YouTube engineers say they don't fully understand the AI in the YouTube recommendation engine. They just give it goals and it's filling in the blanks. So to me, that's actually a profound thing that I've been bringing up a lot lately, that us being humans have a very, very just wave the hand way of just accepting major breakthroughs right in front of us, but just write them off as a, hey, that's cool. Like, oh, I mean, because it starts out rudimentary. Like Netflix thinks that you like this video, so how maybe you'll like that one, and you're like, I didn't really like it that much, so you kind of suck. But lately, the YouTube stuff that I've been listening to has been about business, and I can't tell you that like there's no person calling me up and saying, "Hey, Chad, you got to watch this video." I mean, my friends do, but do I watch their videos? No. What videos do I watch? The ones recommended by YouTube. And it's getting pretty good at what it's doing because I think that it's really figuring out the journey that I'm on lately, which is about systematizing businesses, finding motivation, uh, discipline, those kinds of things specific to business. And so I found some real gems, and it continues. Like more and more, I'm getting more and more videos very well recommended by this engine, right? So how strange is it that 20 years ago plus, I had these thoughts that were not pushed to me. There was no Raymond Kurzweil. There was no word called the singularity that I was aware of. I'd never heard of nanotechnology. I'd never thought that there was really a cryonics lab in Arizona. There's 12 of them worldwide now. And so one of the major frustrations I have is that we're walking into a technological miracle every day, and yet we have to live every day. So most folks that I come in contact with are not living in this miracle. Maybe at times I'm not either. They're just, you can point to them and say, look, that diamond is becoming a rose. That thing over there is so profound that the people who lived the generation just before us would never have this opportunity, but we have this thing coming. It's just a shrug of the shoulders. It's that's nice. And I'm not crying about it. I mean, I've been seeing this response from the people in my life for 2 decades. And even when people see for themselves, it kind of reminds me of a friend of mine who used to talk about how the IRS was no bueno. It was just fake, and that there shouldn't be, that it wasn't constitutional, and they just went on and they sounded like a crazy person. Whether they were right or wrong, it wasn't interesting to me. So I can see now when that's the response I get from people in my life. Not all of them, but mostly the non-computer scientists, is that this stuff doesn't interest me. So in some ways, I feel like I'm imparting the knowledge to them, but in a way, re-corroborating to myself that this is a very strange, fast-moving train that's coming our way, And for more than anything, I'm like anybody else. Like if I want to look across the street before I walk, I don't want to get hit by a car. I'm going to look both ways. And the same with business. I want to understand the future because, if you think that time is finite, then you try to move as fast as you can to be in the best position to take advantage of being an early builder or an early adopter of something or whatnot. So I think that I think that now, after all this time and all of these breakthroughs and watching the Kurzweils of the world and the other guys, and I mean, heck, he works at Google, he's the director of engineering, seeing the artificial intelligence platforms come to life, following 150 data scientists on LinkedIn and watching their videos of them making software tools that are considered narrow AI, not AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, but narrow AI. And they're doing mind-blowing things that for the first 6 months while I was watching all of their stuff come out of the schools, coming out of, TensorFlow and Keras and OpenCV and PoseNet and all the stuff that you can do, my mind was blown, like it has been so many times before. But then you kind of, just like any normal human, I kind of become numb to it. It becomes normalized, accepted. And again, no point to this video other than to document so that in 20 more years, I hope that I can watch this video and still remember the 20 prior year moments when thoughts came into my mind that literally shouldn't, that just were just more like intuitions to go seeking. So now, at my age and where we are with technology, I find myself watching some videos and seeing so much of what was predicted come to pass already. In 2003, I was trying to build a software once for a client that you could talk to it and it would fill out forms. And it was very hard. Microsoft was trying hard. They had something called SALT, simple access language tags, and you could put it on your code, your fields, these little fields you fill out. And it didn't work that great. And so I would Google around, or not Google. I don't even think I used Google back then. I would search around using whatever search engine I was using back then. And the brightest minds you could find on the web were saying, I mean, these are people with major degrees from our best schools. They're like, this will never come to pass in your lifetime that you can talk to a computer as if you're talking to another human being and it will understand you properly. It's always going to have bugs. It's going to be, pretty lame. And at the time, it was pretty lame. It wasn't ready for prime time. But they said at least 45 years. One guy said 45 years. Another one said not in your lifetime. And I did that research. I kept looking and looking and looking, and I'd look from then until now. But again, look at Google. I mean, often we just keep coming back to look what Google did. I mean, Google's voice systems, Alexa, the neural net that they put on our own phones that learns your voice when you talk to it because maybe you have a speech impediment or like I have a hard time saying library. Library. I'm getting better though. Library. And so it learns you. It's got a neural net. It's got axons and dendrites. It's got connections. It can bend its connections. It can make new ones. It can harden them. An artificial neural network, there's different types. Convolutional. They got general functions like sigmoid that does reduction. Um, I've been waiting for AI for 2 decades, and yet here I am still not completely drinking it in, though a heavy user of it. And I find myself, like I said, knowing that this video will be going out and being read by the not so sentient, but the AI of today on YouTube, and then it will be serve to like-minded people on specific channels because I'll see the analytics and I'll be like, why aren't we getting views? I mean, who is basically YouTube, which we take for granted as just YouTube some company, but it's YouTube some software agent taking my video and showing it to someone else. And not randomly either. I mean, using some deep algorithms that, again, human beings on the team that made it don't completely comprehend. It's a crazy time that we're in. So, what will 20 years from now be like? You know, and it's not hard to talk crazy, but it's like I can still remember when they did it, they put a baboon heart in a baby trying to do a heart transplant. But now they're doing things like growing organs in the lab and doing it on lattices with bioreactors and stem cell research and so many competing technologies in biotech that when you talk about the concept of life extension, you know, I remember being in a computer room with big machines all around me and the guy who I asked if I could update the web system, and I literally hand him a disk, even though we had networks, that was their process. They say, bring the disk into the data center, you hand it to me, I pop it in this machine, I do the upload. It was just like, and this wasn't early 2000s, this was like 2010, let's say. The guy turns to me and says, did you know what happened today? I said, what? He said, they cracked the human genome. I said, oh, wow. And, you know, I was in computers, but maybe I hadn't been following it quite like he has been. And I said, "Oh wow, that's great." I pretended like I was like in the know, but I was like, you know, fill me in. And he's like, "Dude, they weren't supposed to do that for another 25 or 15 years or some said it would be 700 more years or never." And they did it like in such a short period of time. And Kurzweil talks about this stuff. And so like I'm kind of on a Kurzweil kick lately because it's easy to go back to him and he's brave enough to do the work and to say the crazy stuff. Okay. So when you hear me talking crazy, you got to know that I'm human just like you. I don't have any particular investment other than the day to day to live and exist and to want to have peace, security, a job, things to do, people to love, you know, have fun, smile, and laugh. But you can't ignore the tidal wave of technology that has come about in our own lifetime here, my lifetime. And so, yeah, I guess I did want to get live and only on Thought Leaders and I guess on my Facebook wall, which I've kept my Facebook group so small. Sometimes there's things I don't want to say that I'll only say to colleagues who work at very big software companies, and they completely understand what I'm saying, and we have some really deep talks, and they're not like Peter Pan talks. They're not like Pixar animation talks. They're like really rooted in current science and the next 5, 10, 15, and 20 years. So, with that said, remember, I'm a researcher, just someone finding shells on a beach and saying, oh, this shell looks pretty. What does this mean? What was in this before? What is that one? Oh, these are part of the same family. You know, how do they correlate? What will the future be like? Is really what I'm saying is that I'm fascinated by prediction, by being able to predict the future. And it won't be long as the software companies do not put so many restrictions on the software that when I talk to Google Home, which I usually use my Google Home and my Alexas now for quick computational, so I don't have to pull up in my calculator. Hey, what's this? What's that? Or foreign exchange of this dollar for that, um, you know, money type, you know, population numbers. But I really want to ask it stuff that I know it's capable of saying now, but they have not released it for the masses. But like, hey, how long until the singularity is going to be here? And I think that there's a growing number of people who no longer refute that it's coming, but just when. So for a while it was, some say never, some say 100 years. But something I learned in tech was that it's not about time because it's linear, it's logarithmic and really about steps, breakthroughs. So for the singularity to come, we'll just say there needs to be 1 million breakthroughs. But how long that takes is how long that takes. But according to these folks like, again, Raymond Kurzweil, who, funny enough, a lot of people who have shown him to, they maybe don't like his style or the way he talks, or they're bored by it, and they make it about him. But really, it's the data that he presents that's interesting. Less about the guy and more about what he's talking about. And so he predicts 2045, while others in the AI field say it could be 2030. Some say 2060. Very rare do you find someone in the computational field nowadays saying never. So what will 20 years from now be like according to Raymond Kurzweil? It'll be 2040. Um, what is someone like Elon Musk talking about? On one hand, everybody will buy his Tesla and let it drive him around, somewhat assisted, but it can go hands free, and they just take that for granted. But I listen to a little, so I go in and out of following the AI guys, right? I'm not pining on this stuff, but when I do go revisit what Kurzweil is saying lately, he's got more numbers, he's got more predictions, he's refining his guesses, and he's been right more than he's been wrong. So I guess, take it for what you want on your side. Yes, there'll be, negative outcomes for people with this type of technology in the future. Yes, oh, I don't know if everyone should live forever, but before you go, I say, look, before anybody, including me, goes saying who should or shouldn't live, um, that's really that's kind of a lot to say, hey, people shouldn't live so long. I mean, just really, until you know for sure that nobody will be able to have food or water, I wouldn't be so easy to jump on preemptive uh, genocide or life limiting discussions where you're like, no, just no, we've cracked the knowledge sphere on aging, but everybody should just naturally die. Like, I think that is a little bit naive, a little bit ignorant, only because I've had deeper thoughts about existence that I won't get into right now. But once you sort of get to a plateau of thinking and you read physicists' papers and you read and you read and you read and you learn and you think and you reflect, eventually you learn that you're not thinking in the now time, you're not thinking in 20 years, you're thinking in breakthroughs. So we've got some forward thinking folks in the world who are thinking about colonizing Mars, also, the moon. And people kind of take that as like that's possible, right? Terraforming, they see the cool 3D designs. Oh yeah, it could be possible. So I guess it's not for me to try to convince anybody that life extension is a real thing. I can't say that I know 100% that I can see the future either. And in fact, I would love nothing more than to be able to use the web of today and find those moments I found 20 years ago where I sit back and my mind is blown and that I actually perceive a future that seems unreal, that gets my head scratching, that gets me going, no way. But then being like eventually convinced. Instead, I find myself now seeing the postulations come to pass and now reflecting because it's not so much what you always envision. The experience of the future coming to pass sometimes doesn't feel as great as you thought. Being a futurist is not a great choice. I mean, on all fronts. I mean, maybe a little bit, but you also see the changes that are coming, and maybe they don't feel so nifty, or you have to deal with them too. Like in 2040, there will be a lot more artificial intelligence systems running around, and we will be utilizing them and working for them. So it's not fair to say that I work for the AI systems. But when I build up some of the 300 Facebook groups I have now, if I click too fast and invite too many people, the automatic AI algorithm, without any human beings involved, warns me, don't do that. And if I invite one more person a minute later, without fail, without empathy, without a human having a good or a bad day, no matter how polite I am, it'll lock me for a week and say, you've been locked out from using the system this way for 1 week. And I'm not a spammer, not by any means. What it's doing is it's governing its own system and it's teaching me how to act on its system with very strict rule typing, no humans involved. Same for this video. That'll go out and there won't be one human being that watches all 1 hour and a half of this because it's just not enough data to keep them in like entertained today. But the AI systems will watch 100% of this. Possibly they'll churn through this more times than I can count to continue to query it for whatever reason. So, do I work for the artificial intelligence systems? Maybe they don't directly pay me, but they certainly are gatekeepers. And they certainly are systems that I think that I'm pushing after more than when I talk to not normal, but when I talk to people who are not so deeply into computer science, they think about the human beings that we're trying to touch on the other side. Oh, maybe we'll go viral. Maybe I'll make this video and 10 million people will like it. But if you talk to me, I know that the number one beast in the system that we need to wake up is the actual AI systems, the algorithms that run the search engines on YouTube, Facebook, and Google are the ones that will provide the 10 million eyeballs if we can get its attention. So I do think about the 10 million as the result, not, and how do we get to them? Sure. And if there's a secret backdoor to getting their attention so that they wake up the algorithm engine, great. But there are ways that I've learned to shake the algorithmic trees of the artificial intelligent engines, the search engines. So we give it fancy names like search engine optimization, search engine marketing, tons of basic ways you can wake them up, but there's also ways that you can sort of play by the rules, but you learn to push very deep, complex ways that you only get to know by doing the job. And so, what's my point? Is that the algorithms are on my mind every day. You know, what do you think you're learning if you're learning search engines? It's not like we're thinking about what the coders are doing. Sure, they put some very deep recipes in there. We're worried about what the AI is doing and how it works. Google occasionally force changes its algorithms with human beings, but all in all, there's a lot of artificial intelligence swimming around. So tonight, I wanted to go live, get this out of my system, see if I'm brave enough to leave it up for a while, hoping that one day I can come back in 20 man years, watch this video and reflect, and maybe make another one, knowing that I'll never have the early 2000s video where it was like, these guys just said that there's a way to preserve your body for up to 1,000 years without any major data loss, and that future technology could revive you, regenerate you, and you can live on. Sounds crazy, right? Sounds even crazy talking about it in 2020. Meanwhile, I mean, I've come up with so many repetitive statements, and am I a futurist? I don't know. Maybe toe in the water, two toes in the water. But like Ted Williams Parkway, you drive down it in San Diego. Ted Williams, there was a big fight between his daughter, who's believed one type of religion, and the son who wanted to do what his father had asked, and he wanted to be put into cryostasis. So just remember this. You probably use an insurance company that's underwriting people who are getting cryonically preserved, who have life insurance policies that are continuing to accrue benefit while they're in cryonic stasis. That there are people arguing in courts right now that people in the cryonic stasis are not dead, but simply in sort of an on-hold state. So you think about that when you think that you were meant to be a descendant of thousands of people procreating, and then you have your own independent genome, your very distinct copy, your own recipe, in a state of 2020, when for I think like $200 or $300, you can buy a CRISPR set, and you can even start doing some very unregulated things like modifying genomes of living hosts, including yourself. I'm not saying do it. I'm not saying I've done it. I'm saying there are people doing it. As weird as it all sounds, this is no longer the, oh, you got chicken pox, we're going to give you, or hey, we're going to give you a vaccine so you don't get X, and they give you a little bit of the disease and let your body build up the antibodies. No, this is like you have the recipe for your RNA and your DNA, and we're going to go in and add or subtract a piece where we see that there's a deficit. Um, I mean, look it up yourself. Just recently, China, they have the twins, and I plan to go live. That's why I'm sharing my screen and look up all this stuff and just be this crazy dude who's like, oh, that's crazy Chad because he's a computer guy and he just thinks all this crazy stuff. But I'm not sure I believe it all. I mean, the biggest joke of all would be that whoever put this whole internet together was just making all this stuff up. But it's all out there for you to figure out yourself. And that's the funny part about the vast majority of the people that have been in my life is they just don't look stuff up. They just want to look up funny videos, make as much money as possible, maybe believe old, outdated religious artifacts in books that have been translated over and over and define that as truth. Whereas that's fine. That's their truth. I don't know exactly what my truth is. I know that my mind is malleable. So if I spend too much time on one subject, I'll shift to that subject pretty well. I adapt. So, but one thing that stayed with me for a long time is I'm inquisitive. And the web has formed into what it is today. I trust it not as much as before because every search now comes with an advertisement. There's a lot more tracking going on. There's limit to information that they give out now. There's control. So I'm not sure what the web of 20 years from now will be like. I'm not sure what the singularity will be like. If you ask me, I would guesstimate that the singularity already happened, and or if it does happen tomorrow or in 25 years, like it's postulated, or in 15 years, if it's that smart, whatever they put together, they'll do a very good job of showing one version of it, but not the real. You know, they'll say, "Oh, this is the singularity. Look what it's doing. It just cured every type of cancer over the weekend. It just painted the most fantastic painting that every single person in the world seems to find affinity with. It just made the most beautiful sonnet after listening to every famous composer, and everybody loves it. I mean, it's just who knows what's good. It's stuff that we can't even perceive, apparently. And I don't want to get lost in the rabbit hole of such deep thinking and such faraway thinking because that ends up expending energy and it definitely sounds like crazy talk. But like today in 2020, I find myself preparing to work for an artificial intelligence company. I find myself serving and working against algorithms that are some version of AI. And that all came to pass. I am also a member of Cryonics Institute, and I've walked the building where it is thought through how protected it is. And I've sat with my future embalmer, a very nice young lady, and walked away after the conversation not realizing that I was talking with my embalmer, quote unquote, who would preserve my body in case I need to take that forward time capsule into a time where biotechnology is just a little bit stronger. So again, I don't know why I share this stuff. Part of me worries that, the people I work with or the people that know me may think less of me, or maybe it'll cost me work, or, I think that's it. You want to go get your great job somewhere, but you don't want them getting confused and going, hey, you don't, aren't you the one who believes in cryonics? Aren't you, and then they ask the obvious dumb question, didn't Disney get his head frozen? And that's just it's an urban legend. That's a no. But if you ask me why Steve Jobs didn't get preserved, man, I would spend a millennium trying to understand him more than anything I believe he would be, and it's just very private. I mean, you mark my words about prediction. the Amazon of the distant future will offer home cryonics preservation tanks that you can put in the ground at your house as long as the law allows it. And that if someone in your family becomes ill from something that cannot be cured in the current technology, it'll be on a roadmap somewhere where it's like, well, it's just about a computational algorithm that will have enough computing power and biotech that we can solve that disease. So they'll put the person into cryostasis. You might call them dead, but as long as they're preserved, I mean, look at the computers that we have today. I mean, the data centers and the amount of cost and expense to keep the data so purely kept and safe in fireproof environments with diesel generators in case the power in the city goes out, and fiber optic cables and redundancy and full palm screen security before they let humans in. They protect these machines like they're the most valued things in the world. And you're telling me that someone you love passes and you can do the same? You can preserve their full shell, their full body, their mind, everything, and they are dying from like some sort of like organ failure, you know. And in a stage when we have bioreactors and we've been able to make stem cells and it's no longer needing neonatal cells, you can actually, I forget the cell type names and that's why I wanted to write it down, but there's a name of like the neogenesis cell. That's the type of stem cell that you can actually make almost anything, any other cell from it. And it used to be that you couldn't get that from anywhere from like, I don't want to say the placenta, but some like the early stage neonatal cells. But now they've been able to like recreate that, and I believe from skin cells from your hand. I don't know. Don't quote me on that one, but dang close. They've been able to make stem cells from more basic cells. I know that. And it just continues to evolve. And it's like maybe what it is, I've gotten a little bit lazy and I haven't gone back and done the research. And also, some of the sites that I used to read, they used to be deeply accurate at the breakthrough after breakthrough. And then they get bought by like the Googles of the world. And all of a sudden, their information dumbs way down. And it's like they keep the information behind the scenes. So who knows? We live in a time of miracles. We still all have to work. We still are all part of a system. Still have to be happy. It feels good to kind of get this stuff out. It does feel a little raw to share it, but yeah, the very chance that I could have to be connected to a distant future, it's not going to like people think, well, do you want to live forever? Well, it's like, well, the me today is just the me today. The me from 20 years ago, he's dead. Like he may be biogenetically connected to me, but he's just a memory. He's a genetic extension of me in time. Might as well have been an ancestor, I might as well be his descendant. But we share the same time clock, to a degree. But according to most people, I've shed every single cell and regenerated many times over since that's 20 years ago. So the me that's 20 years from now is a carbon-based descendant. It just happens to be from my own body and mind. So as weird as that sounds, I need to make decisions so that that person who sits down to make the video at 2040, he may not be hopefully, if these things are coming to pass with regenerative medicine, maybe he'll look very much like I look now. Maybe he'll look his age, but maybe physiologically some of his organs won't be as naturally as aged as possible. I don't know for sure, but the writing seems to be on the wall that if you have money and you live in the right societies, that regenerative medicine will be a thing for you. I can't say that very much for some of the other countries that are sort of trailing along in technology. Their time, much like in companies, is subject to their own timelines. I was saying that on another podcast the other day, or vlogcast. You go into some companies where they decided to build technology with certain technologies and they get invested in it. So if you ever revisit them to work on their stuff, they're working with old technologies, old languages, old system types, and so you really are back in time. So yeah, if you're a member of the United States or a modern civilization, the most modern, you're going to have access to things that give you opportunities that you just simply could not have in other parts of the world. So, yeah, that's a benefit. It's one that I think I have overlooked before, taken for granted. And I look, being a person bringing it up, or whether I believe it or not, again, I'm just a researcher, someone watching the show of life, using the internet, looking up things incessantly. I can't tell you, there's probably been 1,000 times I've been blown away by just like, wow, that's amazing. Like in 2006, they were talking about nanotechnology, nanites that you can put in your bloodstream that constantly take the carbon monoxide that's being expelled inside your bloodstream from your oxygen conversion and reconvert it back to oxygen so that theoretically at the time, and now I don't know about when they say theoretically, they mean like it's possible. We just haven't done it yet. Not like philosophically or not like sci-fi. They're saying a person taking that type of nanomed, having nano machines in their bloodstream, which are really biomagetic machines. They're not metals. They're small things made out of some of the same parts that make your own molecules. Converting the converting the carbon monoxide back into oxygen could allow you to sit at a pool for 2 days at the bottom of a pool after taking one breath, or running like so far and not running out of breath. Like, sounds superhuman, but it's just small tweaks in the biology. So again, I mean, what's the point? You go and you read all the published papers about what it would take to build an actual time machine, and all the physicists agree that that's how you would do it. It would just require this much energy. What does that translate to? Just more thought, some deep thought. Um, don't listen to Nick Bogstrom and simulation theory, because it might make you sad, but then you'll realize, well, simulation is just a human word. And if you take it bad, you take it bad. And if you come out of that and you go, you know what? So what if we're a simulation? Still feel pain and love, still have a fuzzy, happy little puppy, still love my parents, still laugh. It doesn't matter if you're on silicon or on quantum bits or whatever it is that makes the universe. I mean, it's fascinating to listen to them talk about multiverse and quantum and trying to understand the clock of our solar system. And some physicists believe that with the right amount of energies, that they could convert solar systems into big computers. And because of the way they move like clocks, and they constantly are pulling energy, and they have machinery in their own movement. And it's just crazy to think that people think like that. But you read their work. And so anyways, I wanted to go live and do some research so that I could have a benchmark down the road, that when I redo the research again and be like, where are we today? I can go back and say, look at that website. It corroborates this. Look at website. It corroborates that. And I almost want to just let it go and just do it maybe later, because I've tired myself out just talking here. And I don't know who this video has been for. So, like I said, I mean, I'll probably take this video down. Um, I guess a portion of me does want to capture those moments, those aha moments, because I was doing some research tonight and listening to, you type in singularity on YouTube, and then you're just like, man, this search engine YouTube, it's only showing me stuff from 1 year ago, and it's showing me the top 10. And it's like, it's not quite the deep index research tool that the web has always come to be, but there's some good info there. So, I don't know. With all that said, it's been quite a journey being in tech, and after using untold amount of programming languages, learning so much, having my life be shaped in positive ways, the challenges of business and technology, the journey, it's been all worth it. So yeah, at my age now, the next 20 years, it's going to be nothing short of a sci-fi fact journey. And I'm so excited to be a part of it again. And if any of you guys out there who, you know me and you think, well, yeah, Chad's always talking about that stuff. Um, maybe, maybe you'll search for yourself. Maybe you'll teach me something. You know, there's been some aha moments I haven't shared that, I'm a talker, but like there's been times when like I needed to get some software done. So I worked like 3 days straight in my house, on the beach. And I didn't go outside at all except to get food, to go get a burrito. But I had some food in the house. So I'd work like 12 hours, all night long, 5 in the morning, fall asleep, wake up, read a bunch of code I wrote, but I can't remember that I wrote it because it's just working around the clock. Finally getting it doing what I want. Some really complex stuff, some 3D stuff, some two-dimensional animation with code, lots of moving parts, lots of deep code. And then I walked outside and I saw the wind blow through the trees. And I didn't hear the word, that you're taught in religion. All of us are taught about who our God is by name. I didn't, I didn't hear the word. I kind of felt it. And it wasn't, and then at those moments, I felt the complexity of the breeze going through the trees. And because I had been working with such complex code and not talking, I went to go to get my burrito, and it's like I couldn't even talk. Like I could just say one burrito, I was just like I had switched off talking to humans, and I had been in deep, complex thought mode. And then I went and I sat on the beach. It was a gray day, gray, beautiful clouds over the San Diego ocean, and it was the kind of day where the sun was bright, but it was beaming the type of light that made the water look like mercury, silver, as it folded over itself in so many complex ways. Thousands of birds flying above, the wind, the clouds, the billowiness. And in those moments, I never perceived in a deeper way the system that I was a part of, about the strength of the creator or a creator or the creators or whatever was making our world. And it was profound. And I took it to heart, not for granted in those moments. So that's what the computer has brought to me is I've become a designer, an illustrator, an animator, a programmer, a businessman, um, a philosopher, wealthy at times, world traveler at times, stressed out at times, a leader, a team leader, a contributor, someone with the tenacity to believe that anything is possible. So with that, I'm going to close out this video and look forward to watching this again sometime and just saying, I really wish I would have brought up that point or the other point, but I've shared some moments and some thoughts with you guys or with the AI that are going to encode this to the platform right now. Hope they enjoy it. You guys take care.